Arms. Yeah. People. Yeah, Hamas always gets itself into civilian areas and then leaves
Exactly.
Israel.
Baruch Hashem. Not the first time.
Yeah.
Hopefully the last time.
Indeed.
We learned yesterday about where someone does a mitzvah mitoich oini, out of hardship. At the end, Hashem compensates them, and they'll be able to perform the mitzvah mitoich harchava, mitoich ashiras, out of wealth. And we brought the story of Rabbi Zakkai with his mother. Rabbi Zakkai was so poor, he sold all of his possessions to buy wine to make Kiddush on Shabbos day. Later on, his mother sold her own tichel, and at the end, she had many barrels of wine when she passed away. And we learned as well another story of Rev Huna, that he was one time in front of Rav wearing a belt made out of grass. He wasn't even able to afford the knockoff brand. That's how poor he was. And he asked him, why are you wearing such a belt? And he said, because I sold my belt that I have in order to afford wine for Kiddush. And he gave him a bracha, gave him a blessing that you should be wrapped in silk garments. And eventually he became so wealthy that him and his children all became wealthy, and it was by one of his daughter's weddings that his daughters and daughter-in-laws came into a room and didn't realize he was sleeping on a bed, and they covered him in silks. He was totally wrapped up in silks. I guess he wasn't wearing it, but she was wrapped up in it. Rav said, you should have given me a bracha, amen v'chein lamar. So too to you. Based on this, there's a minhag, and the Rebbe was very makbid. Chabad is, we make a deal, make some big deal out of it. Is whenever someone gives you a bracha, you say amen or yasher koyach, same to you. Especially when the kohanim give a bracha, you say yasher koyach, thank you very much. Although they're doing what they're supposed to do, but still you tell them yasher koyach for giving you, thank you for giving you a bracha, and at the same time, that's also wishing them, may you have these blessings as well coming up to you. Now that we're speaking about arichas yamim, living a long life, and the idea of thanking a person, giving a bracha back. So now we're going to go into the topic of someone else who lived a long life, who was a kohen, and we're going to discuss some of the things that he did, that he instituted when it came to birchas kohanim, the blessing of kohanim.
I think it'd become an Ezra, right?
We're going to talk about Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua.
Oh, then Ezra was a kohen.
Shalu Talmidav es Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. The students of Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua asked the question, Bameh herachta yamim. In what virtue were you merited to have a long life? Now I'm going to open up, you'll see on the screen, Elazar ben Shemua, here is where he's buried. He's a famous Rabbi Elazar. Whenever Rabbi Elazar is mentioned in the Mishnah without a name, it's usually Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. After Rabbi Akiva's 22,000 students passed away, or 24,000 students passed away, and later on he got 5 more students, 5 new students, or 5 who survived. One of them was Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua was so close to Rabbi Akiva. Now, when Rabbi Akiva was arrested, he was one of those put in prison before he was killed in a very gruesome way. He was one of the students who were with Rabbi Akiva in prison. It was him together with Yebrechin and Sandler. I think they both were from the Asarei Rugei Malchus. Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, when he died, he lived to be, I think, 105 years old. And however, he was one of the Asarei Rugei Malchus, the 10 martyrs who were killed by the Romans. They correspond to the 10 Shvatim, the 10 tribes who sold Yosef. He was a kohen, so some say he was corresponding to Shevet Levi, who would come from Kanim. Some says he corresponds to Shevet Shimon, because Shimon, he lived a long life, but he compensated for whatever Shimon did. After Rebbe Akiva was killed, he wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael. He ended up staying in Eretz Yisrael. He settled in the Galil, and that's where he's buried, in the Galil. And it's described how packed the Beis Medrash was. Whenever he would teach, there were 6 students sitting in a place of Amma. That's how packed, that's how full the Beis Medrash was whenever Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua would speak. In every square Amma, that's about 2 feet by 2 feet, you have to squeeze in 6 people. It doesn't hold a torch, hold a candle even to 770. You squeeze in more than that sometimes. So this is Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. When he was killed, he was making Kiddush Friday night, and he was in the middle of saying the words of Kiddush when the Romans broke into his house, and they killed him in the middle of recitation of Kiddush, and he died while he's saying the words Asher Bara. They killed him while he's saying Vayikadesh Oisam, and he sanctified them by the word Vayikadesh, and he sanctified. That's when they killed him. That's when they stabbed him. And he continued saying the words of Kiddush, and the last words he managed to say before breathing his last was Elokim. Asher bara Elokim, that Hashem created. Last word is la'asos, to do, and that he didn't manage to say. And it says la'asos, to do, is corresponding to the times of Mashiach. Hashem created the world, la'asos, learned to basilagani, l'taken, to fix, to make the world better. And that's Rabbi Elazar didn't get to do, because he had to compensate, he had to mechaper, for atone for the Jewish nation. So although Rabbi Elazar was killed by the Romans, but he was considered to have lived a very long life. And so his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, lived to be 120. He was also a long life, although he was killed by the Romans. He was one of the 5 students, the 5 Talmidim, who Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was also one of the 10 martyrs. He wanted to continue the practice of smicha in Eretz Yisrael, which is a special type of smicha, which we don't have anymore because we were forced, unfortunately, by exile to leave. And he was one of the 5 Talmidim, 5 students who was given smicha. The Romans made it illegal to continue smicha, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua gave it to them in the middle of the wilderness in a narrow mountain pass. And the Romans came to attack. He stood in the way, and they pierced him several hundred times with their spears. But they 5 managed to run away and continued smicha. So Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, one of the greatest Tanaim, and they asked him, "B'meh harachta yamim?" With what merit have you virtue have you merited to live a long life?
Because he lived a long life, and then she was killed as she is a very old man.
Correct.
Right.
I was reading about this. One of the sons of Divrei Chaim, he was, I think, 94 when he was taken by the Nazis to Auschwitz.
A son of the Divrei Chaim?
Yeah, he has several children who were killed by the Nazis.
Wow.
Over 2 or 3 children were killed by the Germans. And the thing is, imagine he lived 94 years and he still died al Kiddush Hashem.
That really is amazing.
The Beis Yosef, his entire life, he wanted to have the merit of dying al Kiddush Hashem, and he wasn't given that zchus. And he lived to be, I think, 90, which were 80, very old for his times.
It said his Talmud actually, he had a Talmud who I think was an ex-Morano.
Correct.
He became actually the
Chassidus does say that the neshama of the Beis Yosef came back again to this world and merited to die al Kiddush Hashem. So he did fulfill his wish in the next Gilgal. But you can imagine how great is the greatness of his Sfarim that he wrote, Shulchan Aruch that we live by, and everything else that the Beis Yosef wrote on the Rambam, and everything else that he did, and Torah he accomplished, and he had Malach who taught him, and all that pales in comparison to a Jew who died al Kiddush Hashem. So the students asked Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, in what virtue were you blessed with a long life? Amar Lahem, he told them, here's things I've never done. Miyamai I never made a shul or a study hall into a shortcut. Now the Mishnah says you cannot make the Beis Hamikdash, the Har Habayis, the Temple Mount, into a shortcut.
What does that mean? I haven't made it into a shortcut.
So to walk, let's say let's say the yeshiva building. You want to walk to the other side. You shouldn't walk through the building. The Temple Mount, to walk around could take you a full mile. If I want to just get somewhere, maybe walk right over it. So I never made a shul into a shortcut.
And is this actually halakha l'maisa?
Yeah, halakha l'maisa.
I see.
We're going to go to the next amud. We're going to discuss a little more. there are sort of ways you are allowed to do it, meaning if you go into the shul, you stop, you sit down, and you say a pasuk, you say a word of Torah, then it will be allowed technically. Beis HaMikdash, you're never allowed to do that. But Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, he introduced what was from the Beis HaMikdash, that because then the holy shul was the Beis HaMikdash. Introducing the Beis HaMikdash to all other shuls. And even more than that, the Mefarshim say that he didn't even use a loophole that there is to walk through the shul, say a few words of Torah, sit down for a minute or two, and then go further. He didn't even use that loophole. And the important word over here, you'll see, from everybody is miyamai, my entire life. My entire life, I made sure of this. Meaning this is something that was, many people do this, it's halacha. But the fact that he was so strict in miyamai his entire life, meaning that it became so a focus of him his entire life. So I had to walk around shul, I had to walk around longer. And because of that, Hashem said, okay, you took extra time to walk longer, to walk around the shul, to honor the shul. I'm going to give you more time as well. And that's why he lived a long life. And the same thing for the next thing. Lepesati al Roshei Am Kodesh. It says Pesati. You say Pesachti.
What is it?
It says Pesati. Yeah. Yeah. I have never stepped over the heads of Rosh Yam Kodesh, the heads of the people, cause of the Jewish nation. When, especially in those days, they weren't very much into the furniture of the Beis Medrash. They were more into the quality over quantity. Right? The level of learning was very great, but so everybody, all the students sat on the floor, and the only one to sit on a chair or a bench was the Rosh Hashiva, the teacher. So when he would walk in, he could walk over people's heads. But he says, since every Jew is Am Kodesh, is a holy nation, Hashem's sons, you will be a holy nation. So he didn't want to walk over their heads. When a person learns Torah, Shekhinah is on his head. He didn't want to walk over anybody's head. So they're all surrounding him in a circle, let's say. So he didn't want to walk over their heads. So he never walked around, he walked in between. Another understanding of this Gemara means not to step over, but rather not to bother them. When he walks into the room, so assuming everyone is in a half circle facing the teacher, so he could walk in from the back, and as he walks in, everyone has to stand up for him. And he didn't want to burden everyone to stand up for him. So he used to walk extra long. Let's say walk in from not the main entrance, not the main gate, walking from the back and go straight to his place. So people shouldn't have to stand. All the students, Talmidim should not have to stand up for him. So in order not to bother them, he used to walk extra time. Hashem says, okay, I'll give you extra time. And therefore he lived a very long life. That's what it means. He never walked over their heads, or he never bothered them, and to show that he's a Rosh. I'm your teacher, I'm your boss, I'm the one in charge over here.
I think that's why the Rebbe Shabbos for Benjamin, when he made Kiddush, he didn't stand up.
Interesting. So that's why you think the Rebbe didn't stand by Kiddush on Shabbos morning, so everyone else would stand up.
But I always somehow understood, you stand for Kiddush, Shabbos by night, Friday night, and Shabbos by day. People say, no, look, the Rebbe sits from there, and what's he doesn't want to have the oil, Matriach the oil to stand up.
Interesting. That's an interesting thing. There's it says if the students are lacking Yiras Shamayim, then it's a mitzvah for the teacher to walk by them and to make them stand up. In order to teach them, he should stand up for a Talmid Chacham, for a Rav. But if his students are on a high caliber, then there's a hidur. Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua did not to bother them, not to have to make people stand up unnecessarily. What you're saying makes sense. The Rebbe also didn't get a silver wine bottle by the Fabringen. People bought, people gave. And the Rebbe always used a plain bottle covered by a paper bag. The Rebbe says, if I get a silver wine decanter, every chassid is gonna buy one then. Right, so the Rebbe didn't want to bother people.
The Rebbe was also very, very humble. When not trying to do it, she lorded over people. It was only one particular case when he was actually sitting in the basement. All of a sudden, when he realized he had to show his friend the honor because he had to be assertive. So all of a sudden,
Correct.
Like, he's a big shot.
Right. There's of course times to be assertive.
Mm-hmm.
But the third thing he did is v'loinasasi kapai beli bracha. I never raised my hands. He was a kohen. Do brachas kohanim. He never raised his hands. I didn't do it two hands, so okay. He never raised his hands to give brachas kohanim unless he made a bracha, a blessing first. What does that mean? Every kohen who does brachas kohanim makes a bracha.
Certainly nowadays.
Certainly nowadays, correct. There's about 10 different pirushim on this, so I'll give just 2 or 3 of them. What it actually means. One is that if you already said Birchas Kohanim one time, and then he passes by another minyan which is doing Birchas Kohanim, he didn't say, oh, I already did it today. He would join the next minyan and do Birchas Kohanim. Because he always wanted to give another bracha, another blessing to another Jew. That was something he always looked out to do. Back then, and there's another pirush, is Birchas Kohanim, they didn't say a bracha on it. On the Birchas Kohanim, not necessarily. Only later, he was the one who introduced to make the bracha on it. Because they only made a bracha in the Beis HaMikdash. And he was, again, at the time of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, so he introduced to make the bracha of Birchas Kohanim. Another thing is, the stress that he made is, I made the bracha, the blessing. What's unique about the blessing? Right? He says, the last word of the bracha is, Hashem commanded us to give a bracha be'ahava, with love.
Yeah.
So when he gave the bracha, his main concern was be'ahava, to do it out of love. If a kohen gives a bracha with excitement, then the bracha comes even more. Another understanding is that there's a chiddush. It says you don't make there's a Gemara. It says you don't make a bracha for a bracha. You don't make a bracha hereby. I'm now going to make the bracha of Birchas Hamazon. You don't make a bracha for that. So Birchas Kohanim is a blessing, the Kohanim say. So why should you say a bracha, a blessing, that I'm going to give a blessing? So that was Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua's chiddush, so you can make a blessing. Because your blessing is not necessarily only in doing the mitzvah, but in how you do the mitzvah, which is the idea of ahava, with love. So from all of these...
Do you know whether he composed the bracha?
I don't know. Did he compose a bracha? I don't know. I'm saying usually you say brachas were composed by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, but he was the one who introduced it, I guess, to bring it in. Because until that point, the bracha was said only in the Beis HaMikdash. Right? But now in every shul where they say Birchas Kohanim, he was the one to bring it in. Yeah, I think there is more of a deeper thing to it, because if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei, not necessarily do you have to make a bracha, do you make a blessing? Because as we learned, Malchus, Zecharinas, and Shofars on a fast day, we learned in Mesechta Megillah, they would do Birchas Kohanim, the Kohanim would do it, but they wouldn't make a blessing on it. So if it's part of Shemona Esrei, not necessarily would you need a bracha. And he introduced they should say a bracha on it. So you definitely could look into it more to see. So that's Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. What is this? That's just the bracha of Birchas Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim. Let's go to the next one, Rav Preda. We're up to the last line on the page of Chav Zayin on the base, 27b. Monday we'll start off with a quiz on Daf Chav Zayin, so make sure to chazer. Shalu Talmida v'Reb Preda. The students asked Reb Preda. Reb Preda, he lived to be a very long life. He lived to be 400 years old. They asked him, what merit did you have to live such a long life? Now, he didn't know at that point how long he's going to live. He just knew that he's living longer than all of his other colleagues and friends. So they asked him, what merit have you attained such a long life? There was somebody goes up to, walking down the street in a small town, and he sees an old man sitting on a porch on his rocking chair. And he asks him, tell me, what do you do? What's your secret? He says, every day I smoke 3 packs of cigarettes. I finish a case of whiskey a week. I don't do any exercise. I eat fats, sweets. He says, how old are you? He says, I'm 29.
He was over 113 years old.
Yeah.
They asked her to what shows her old age. She said, from the age of 13, the only liquid that ever went into her mouth was beer.
Was beer. What's actually true. Saying beer, especially back if she's 113, is because other waters were unhealthy. Wasn't filtered, wasn't sanitized, it wasn't boiled, no chlorine. Right? So it was a common thing that even children drink beer because beer was healthy. You wouldn't get sick from it because it's boiled, it's fermented. So the story with Reb Preda, let me bring it up. Erevin, Daf Nun Vav. You see over here, Reb Preda v'lo hu tamida. Reb Preda was a very patient teacher, and he had a certain student. Davatani le aber meyazimni. This is Erevin Daf Nun Dalet, so you can just see it on the screen. And he would have to teach him 400 times, repeat the material. Are those who say 400 is just a number for a very large amount, but some say it's actually 400. But at any rate, an extraordinary amount of times he had to review it and teach it over and over and over to his students. Vigamar, in order to teach it. Yom Echad, one day, Bayu lemilsa the mitzvah. Reb Preda's presence was needed for a mitzvah, and Mefarshim over there said that his daughter was getting married, so he was needed to be at the wedding of his daughter. Tana lei v'lei gamar. But he was teaching that student, so he still taught the student 400 times, like usual. But the student didn't understand it even after 400 times. Amar lei told him, Reb Preda told him, Ha'idna maishna lei mi dahi shaita. What's different today than every other day? That today you didn't understand the lesson. I already repeated to you 400 times already. So like why today is different than other days that you don't get it? So the Amar lei lemar. So he answered back, Lemar ika milzu the mitzvah. Ask latatai. I realized that you have a mitzvah to do. I mean, you have a wedding to go to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, you have to get to the wedding, you're probably rushing, and I wasn't able to focus on the lesson because of that. Because you have to rush to go to where the mitzvah that you have to do. And I was telling myself as a student every moment, hashta kayimar. Now the master is going to get up and leave. Now he's going to get up and leave. So I wasn't able to focus and pay attention today. Amar lei, so Reb Preda answered back to him, have that taich. Calm down, don't worry about it. You could relax your the asni lich, and I will teach it to you as long as you need, and I'm not going to get up and leave in the middle. And he had to teach it to him another 400 times. So on a day when he's extremely busy, he took an extra 400 times. Nafka bas kalva amrle. The heavenly voice came out, and again, Etana was able to hear the heavenly voices, many stories of this. And he says, Nicha Allah, we want to give you a reward, we want to grant you something because of his great schus, a merit that you had. And we'll give you a choice. Here's what we're going to give you. Nicha Allah the lispalach arba meishani. Do you want to live an extra 400 years to your life? Or should you, because your schus is so great, you and your entire generation will merit the world to come. That means either they won't go into Gehenna, or they'll merit the great revelations that a Preda is But because your schus is so great, they gave him a choice. Which one do you want? Amari says, the niskwani v'dayir lamad yasi. Doesn't matter how long I live. Rather, more important than me, my generation should all be brought into the world to come. Amar lehen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then the Holy One, blessed be Hashem, said, Tnu lo zu v'zu. Let him have this one and that one. So him and his entire generation were brought to the world to come. Plus, he got to live an extra 400 years. So that was a merit of his long life. Says Tosfos over there, that's sort of after the fact that he knew that he's going to live a long life. However, this is before the fact, meaning he didn't yet know. He just sees that he's living longer than others, but he doesn't know he's living extraordinary longer than everybody else. Or the other thing is that Zev Ezeh Gardim, the things we're going to see in the Gemara here and that story over there together were the causes for him to live a long life.
And when was he born?
I tried checking it up before this year. I'm not sure exactly his time period. Seems to me most of the times of Tanaim and a good chunk of them are Rayim. I couldn't find in my first search at least exactly his time period. So they asked the students of Rebbe asked him, what merit, what virtue did you live a long life? Amar Lemi told them, I was always the first one to arrive in the shul in the morning. Now think about it. Why is he arriving the first one? Of course, it's a very big schus. Never coming late. You're careful with your time. Hashem adds time to you. But even more than that, remember we said previously about Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, why he lived so long? Because he never wanted to bother his students to stand up for him. So the Preda came before everybody. They shouldn't have to stand up for him. Because if he's the first one in the base medrash over there in the shul, so when they come in, they don't have to stand up for him as he's already there. So the same thing applies. Since he took his time, extra time, in order to not bother others, so therefore to help others, so therefore Hashem in turn paid him back and gave him extra time to live. Turning the page, Chaf Ches Amad Aleph Koyach, the 28th. Koyach is strength. This is the strength matria is Ira here. The matria of Yechi Yud Ches Yud is also 28. So 28 Daf Chaf Ches. Next thing is V'loy berachti lifnei kohen. I always gave honor to a kohen. If a kohen was ever in the room, I let him do the birchas hamazon, the benching first, or even though I'm such a big Talmid Chacham and I could get the first aliyah, I would always give it to a kohen. So I always honored the kohen, and is a mitzvah says v'kidashta. We'll get to that next week. But remember, we said about Elazar ben Shemua. He passed away. He was while he said the word lekadeshai, vayikadesh, and so he's connecting to it. He says the way we know a kohen has to be sanctified is v'kidashtai. You must sanctify him. And the same idea that Elazar ben Shemua passed away by the idea of showing the specialty of a kohen. He also shows the specialty, the greatness of a kohen. And also I honored a kohen by making sure whenever I ate meat from any animal that the priestly matanas, the gifts, were given to the kohen. It's not something that we do nowadays. It was only in times of the Beis HaMikdash. But even then, even though he lived at a time after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, he still was very careful about it, that he would not eat any meat unless he made sure, and not just it was kosher, but also that the gifts were given to the kohen. Okay, we will continue here with Veyadaata Moskva. We have the book, or we have a few copies. Veyadaata Moskva. So if you ever lose track, Now, there's one mimer that you could learn, and then there's another mimer which you could find a whole new mimer over here. It fits many, many ideas finds many applications. Let's look at the pasuk, at the verse, where this mimer is based off of. We'll show Rashi over here. Hebrew and English. Now, let's go down the screen. It's pasuk Lametes. Wrong chapter. Chapter 4. We're on page 34 in this book.
Where are the pages?
Page 34. The Maimer Veyadaata Moskva. Veyadaata in the city of Moscow. Right? Why specifically Moscow? Because it's somewhere which is it's a large city, right? No longer in Lubavitch. And to say how everything which is starting to unravel the entire Jewish world, don't think that it's separate from Hashem, but Veyadaata, yeah, and you should know, Ki Hashem hu Elikim. Havaya is Elikim. Pasuk Lametes. Havaya is the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav, is the essence of Hashem. And as a matter of fact, we don't even say Hashem's name. Even if there's a religion which uses Hashem's name, we don't say it, right? The witnesses. Why? Because it's Hashem's name. We cannot say it. We say Hashem, which means the name, which showing on the name of Hashem, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Elikim is a gematria of Hateva, which is 84, and Hashem conceals himself in the name of Elikim. Havaya means Haya Hoiva, was, is, will be, past, present, and future. On Yom Kippur, at the end of Yom Kippur, right, the very end of Yom Kippur, right before we blow the shofar, at the end of Ne'ilah, we're inside, just us and Hashem. And what's the pinnacle of Yom Kippur? We scream out once, Shema Yisrael. Second, we scream out 3 times Baruch Shem. And third time, we scream out 7 times, Hashem hu Elikim, Hashem is Elikim. And that's what this pasuk is saying right over here. A person is going to ask and say, what is the purpose of creation? Right? I'm page 34, but you could read ahead. If I'm just, he can say, merely a guide. But if you find somewhere you want to read, by all means, go ahead and read it. I'm going to be, we're not going to be doing more than one lesson, because here the introduction is about 3-4 lessons. We want to already get into the meat of the mimer. Hashem is Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people, has any nation ever seen the greatness that Hashem has done for you? Pasuk Lamed Hey 35. You have been shown ki Hashem ladas, to know. Ladas is knowledge. It's the idea of siddur, to apply with your knowledge. Ki Hashem hu Elikim, God is Elikim. The name of Yud Kei Vav Kei is the only God. Ein oid milvadoi. There's nothing else but Him, but Hashem. Says further, Veyadaata yom hashavos el vavecha. And this is what this mimer is on. You should know today and take it to heart. Ki Hashem hu Elikim hashemayim imav al aretz mitachas ein oid. That Hashem is the only God in the heavens above and in the earth below. Ein oid. There is nothing else besides Him. Now, Havaya is that Hashem is the only existence in the world. Hashem is constantly creating the world. Paro, the king of the Egyptians, he says, Lo yadati es Hashem. I do not know God. Because by him, Hashem might have created the world, but in his mind, Hashem left the world. And Hashem doesn't bother Hashem what takes place in the world. He said, Hashem is not Elikim. Elikim is a nature as we know it, the concealment of God. Hashem is the essence of God. And he says these are 2 separate things. What was the purpose of all 10 plagues? Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu that I'm giving the plagues in Mitzrayim. V'datem ki ani Hashem. They should know that I am Hashem. They should know that everything that takes place in the world is Hashem, the essence of Hashem behind it all. If Moshe Rabbeinu, as it says in Tanya, wanted to just take the Jews out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, He could have just taken them out of Egypt.
Hmm.
Could power have stopped them? Power was powerless to stop them. The first plague already, he saw he had no power. Even before that, he wasn't powerless when it came to this Moshe's staff turning into a stick. But as Tanya says, what was the purpose? Why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu drag it out for almost a year? 10 plagues. Why not just take them out? The purpose wasn't to only take them out. As Hashem says, the purpose was that the Egyptians' mindsets should change. That the Egyptians themselves, which was the ultimate concealment of Hashem, that should be knowing Veyadaata Moskva Hashem. They should know the essence of Hashem. That they should have a Havaya consciousness. So Elokim is sort of when Hashem is acting natural. Havaya is when Hashem acts miraculous. Now the regular day-to-day life seems natural. Truth is, that's the biggest deception ever. Because a day-to-day life, the sun rising and going down, anything else that happens is a very great miracle. Why does it seem like nature? Nature means that it happens over and over and over. And Hashem makes it happen so consistently that it seems that it's a natural thing. But in essence, it's actually, it's Havaya. It is the essence of Hashem. So the way, again, Rabbi Vigler here brings in the Mimer, says, the Mimer is explaining, why does life have to be so hard? Why can't Hashem just make it simple, easy? How come we find when people many times get more involved in doing mitzvahs, sometimes it's harder for them? Why does the other person always have it better and easier? So the mashal which is going to be brought over here in this mimer, and it's brought in the mimer of Rebbe Parcher, it's called Isa Bipsikta. The mashal, the example of a teacher and a student. A teacher is a very wise person, very smart. If you really know what they're talking about, then they could explain even the most complex ideas in the most simple way. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a family reunion, you haven't seen people in years. Children finally come over, and what do the whole day? They're on their phones. Right? Are they physically there? Probably, yeah, they're physically there, physically present. Are they really actually present? No. They're not present at all. And even if you're speaking to them, they're only halfway there. They're halfway focused on something else. Such a person, when would you even feel closer to them? If you speak to them directly, a phone conversation, you might even feel closer to them than when they're in the same room and they're distracted with something else. If people who didn't see each other for a long time are suddenly around each other, it takes a very short time for the excitement to wear off, and then you take each other for granted again. Right, so this is the famous Negin Tzamalacha Nafshi. I'm thirsty for you, Hashem. In a barren land where there's no water. David HaMelech was far in the desert, and he thirsted for Hashem. And he says, if only I could have such excitement, yearning for you as I had over there. It's reading the Kollel Rebbe, the one from Eretz Yisrael. The whole Holocaust survivor, him and his wife, unfortunately, because they both were unfortunately victims of experiments by Mengele, so they never could have children. He never was able to have a beard. He was a Rebbe, Chassidish Rebbe, came from Tzadikim, and he made it his project to bring awareness of the Kiddush Hashem of the Holocaust. There's Holocaust museums and there's Holocaust things. We'll talk about the tragedy of the Holocaust, talk about maybe the heroism of those who fought back, but he made a museum and he made do the Kiddush Hashem of the Holocaust. How Hashem's name was sanctified, and miracles in the Holocaust. And one of the things is a story that this was in Auschwitz in 1945. I don't know, 1944. Tashin Hay. This is on Rosh Hashanah. So right before there was evacuated, started a death march. And it was there was only one time or two times that they actually threw bombs on Auschwitz. And there was a group of say Hasidish yeshiva boys who were there alive in Auschwitz, and they managed on Yom Kippur. They found the basement of a hut over there, and they all gathered together, and they davened Yom Kippur davening together. And they said they never davened like that ever in their life. And then suddenly it was a Nazi came out, a Nazi came bursting in. What are you doing here? Get out, and they were going to execute them. And so suddenly he says there was a bombing, and those Nazi soldiers were all killed. And they managed to run away and escape. And Baruch Hashem, a lot of them survived the war. But he says that davening that we had over there, we never had before, that and never will have again. Such a davening we're never able to have. The intensity of Ava you have is not able to be, you can't compare it when you don't have it. Right? The Chassidim in Russia have a tremendous longing to see the Rebbe when they were there and they couldn't get out. And afterwards, someone who lives in Crown Heights, you don't have that same longing anymore. So the fact that you're far away causes you to have a tshuka, a desire for this. In Tanya, in Igeres HaKodesh, chapter 27, he says that a tzaddik who passes away is more connected and is more in this world even during his life. Because you're able to connect with someone who passed away after they passed away in many ways, even more. How is this possible? Because if you're looking just at the physical part, at the elikim part, the concealment part, so then all you see is the physical manifestation of it, and you don't see the spiritual manifestation of it. But if you veyadaata, it's a mitzvah to know Hashem, relate to Hashem, even when it's good and it's not dark, you're going to know Hashem. Now, wouldn't it be nice if everything would be good? Of course, the Rebbe many times, hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times, definitely hundreds, the Rebbe asked, it should be toiv anir vanigla, gave a bracha, should be open, revealed good. Hashem could give good where it's only good deep down. But of course, we ask for apparent good. But veyadaata, by thinking about it, realizing everything Hashem does is good, that is going to also bring how it should be good in an open way. That's veyadaata. You should know ki Hashem hu elikim, that Havaya is elikim. Okay. So how do you break the shell? And he's able to, the introduction here goes through, I think, 7 lessons. Or 5 lessons. So how do you break the shell? How do you break the illusion? How do you realize that there's no such thing as Mother Nature, but Hashem? There's no such thing as the universe, which is just a way of saying it. Rather, it's Hashem who's constantly making it every single second, every single moment. Hashem just conceals himself, sort of like a mask, a veil. And one term is klipa. What does klipa mean? A peel or a shell, which covers over. You can have Hashem's infinite light, and it's literally just covered over by a shell, covered over. If you have a wire, it might be covered by a small rubber covering, but if you touch the wire, you might get electrocuted. Because the energy inside is tremendous. Our neshama is here; it's in the world. Our neshama is never concealed. However, our nefesh ba'amis, our animal soul, does conceal the manifestation of godliness. Now, a person could say, what do you expect? Hashem, you put me into such a place. I was raised in such an environment. I was, I can't, after having tasted the best non-kosher food that's out there, I can't get myself to eat just this kosher food. After having enjoyed some of this greatest, there's many examples. So I cannot get myself to enjoy something, of kedusha, of holiness. That's what the nefesh of Ham is, a natural soul. And of course, the animal soul and the nefesh elikis and the godly soul are always fighting with each other. Now, the Alter Rebbe explains that it's not that if a person sometimes feels inspired to do a mitzvah, and then the next moment he's excited to do something the opposite of a mitzvah, it's not a problem with him. who am I? He has two souls fighting. Whoever he's following at that moment, that's who he becomes at that time. But there's an inside and there's an outside. Klipa is the outer layer, and we have to just remove the outer layer. Imagine your glass. Imagine you're walking outside, and you were working outside, cutting wood the whole day. And your glasses are all dirty, and then you clean your glasses. Suddenly, it's like a whole new world opened up. So this mimer is essentially just clearing our glasses. If you want to read some entertaining applications, you can read page 49. Racism, celebrities, politicians, Purim, doctors, lawyers, rabbis, cantors, junk food, but these credit cards, Hollywood. But the idea that he's trying to bring out from all of this is that there's an outer layer, and many people try showing how good they do and how great it is, or things that they're doing which are great. But you should know, that's only to conceal what they have inside, that they're not doing something good. But rather, what's more important is to know that what's inside is Havaya. Havaya Elikim, Hashem is Elikim. Want to read these pages? You can go ahead and do it. We're going to pause over here. Shukayach, thank you for joining. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Label, thank you.